I'm Jason with Born Handy, and this is part 5 of the ultimate 75-gallon aquarium build. And in this video, I'm going to go over plumbing and electrical, and I'm going to start off with how I solved the problem of getting fresh air to the protein skimmer. I started by drilling a hole in the wall behind the aquarium, just big enough for 1/2-inch pipe to pass through. Then I drilled the same size hole in the top of that wall from the attic, and I slid a 10-foot section of 1/2-inch pipe down. Next, I temporarily removed an outlet box so that I could glue an elbow onto the end of the pipe, then used tape and a wire to pull the elbow into alignment with the hole that I had drilled earlier. After that, I removed the wire but held onto the tape so that I could glue a section of pipe into the elbow. Then I trimmed the pipe and glued on the assembly with the barb fitting and ball valve. That finished the inside, but I still needed the pipe to reach a source of fresh air. So I ran the remaining section of pipe out of 3/4 inch to an attic vent and attached that pipe to a few framing studs, then to the 1/2-inch pipe that I had ran earlier. Now I had 23-foot run straight to fresh air, and it was easy to pull air through. There's actually a very good reason that I didn't just do 25 feet of this to get where I'm going, because ultimately that's about the length that I ran. If you were to try to take a deep breath through a section of 3/8-inch tubing that were about 25 feet long, I think you'd be surprised how hard it is to draw a breath of air through that. You actually wouldn't be able to get enough air to breathe, even if you were super relaxed. The way that I have this configured, it starts off with 3 or 4 feet of 3/8-inch tubing where it connects to a barb fitting that actually has a much smaller hole than the diameter of the 3/8 tubing, but because it immediately opens up to 1/2-inch pipe and then 10 feet later opens up again to 3/4 inch pipe, you'll actually find it pretty easy to draw a breath of air through, and so the skimmer should have no problem pulling the amount of air needed in order to operate. It's pretty widely understood that one of the huge benefits of having a protein skimmer is the gas exchange, but it's not as widely understood that elevated levels of CO2 in our homes can have a huge impact on our reef aquarium's ability to maintain a high pH, especially at night. And so we've instituted things like refugiums. Some of us, where we can, open a window to allow that gas exchange to be a little bit more even from day to night. But ultimately, there's just no substitute for bringing in fresh air to the skimmer full time, and so that's the method that I've chosen to use here. And if that doesn't work, we may also institute a CO2 scrubber later on. And with that out of the way, we're going to start off with the custom overflow box that I have here. Over here on the right, we're going to start off with our primary drain. This will be the full siphon, and it'll be controlled with this gate valve down here at the bottom. You'll notice the gate valve is put on with a couple of true unions, and the idea behind these unions, one side being higher than the other, is that if I need this valve to be closer to the overflow box, I can undo each union and simply flip it over and raise this to about this level here. I know it may not seem like much of a difference, but it does give me some level of adjustability and some way to try it out a little. I've gone ahead and started here because reaching this is fairly easy around this pipe, but it was going to be a little bit trickier to get around that counterweight, which helps me raise and lower the canopy without any real trouble. After it runs through this gate valve here, where it'll be adjusted for the full siphon, it'll dump into the sump, hopefully quietly. And then I will have my secondary drain, which will come through at this point here and drain right alongside of the primary. Completing the bean animal, I have the full emergency side of the overflow, and that'll dump into the pump side and hopefully make a lot of noise and let me know that something's wrong. That way I should be able to make fairly immediate adjustments to get the siphon going again and figure out what's causing the problem in the first place. Maintenance on the box is pretty easy with the canopy in the upright position, but since the tank is turned around, I'll just show you that from the back now. This part lifts off, and it's a pretty generous amount of room in here. You can pretty easily get your whole hand in here to do whatever you needed to do. And I did make the box quite a bit wider than anything that I have found offered online, because sometimes these can get into some pretty cramped spaces when you're trying to get these on and get it in such a way where nothing is interfering with anything else. The only one problem that I do have is that my secondary overflow is a little closer to the bulkhead than I actually liked, but I just don't think it's going to be a problem when you look at this side and see how much of it is unimpeded. After we leave the main pump, we're going to come up to the back of the aquarium where we do hit a single 45 degree, and then we hit a T, and my line breaks into 2 directions, and I have drilled the back of the tank, and I supply through 1.25 inch pipe to a bulkhead here and to a bulkhead on this side. And now it's time to look at the front of the tank and see how that's delivered. And over here is my main pump where it connects to 1.25 inch line, hits a 90 degree elbow, comes over, catches a 45 degree, and then splits out to the 2 supply sides in the back of the tank. And then those, of course, come through and they spray on either side of the tank with a Y and a splitter pretty close to the surface so as not to create a siphon that will overfill the sump in the event of a power outage. So it's probably just a little tricky to see, but here's the ball valve that I'll use to adjust the airflow to the protein skimmer. And here is that 3/8 tubing that comes to the protein skimmer and will connect to the protein skimmer silencer. And so that completes that plumbing loop. And while I'm adding water to the tank, I'm going to address the final issue with plumbing. And I'm going to go ahead and say that I had initially intended to use all 45-degree elbows because I have always been of the opinion that that is going to make a huge difference in the amount of flow. But if you haven't seen it, the BRS Investigates series is a pretty good series that puts things to the test that a lot of reefers believe may or may not be true. And one of the tests that they've done recently was, do 90s or 45s make that big of a difference in your plumbing? And I was a little bit surprised to see that it makes almost no difference. So in terms of my plumbing design, it was designed to look and be as neat as possible, and not so much around the idea of using 45s. I'll include a link to that description in the video, and I want to give a thanks to Bulk Reef Supply for letting me use a segment of this video. I put in a call and permission was pretty easy to get from Randy. And now let's take a brief tour of the electrical. I basically just screwed a sheet of 3/4 inch plywood to the wall because I don't want to have to try to hunt for a stud every time I'm going to be screwing in a piece of equipment. And so by screwing the plywood directly to the studs, it now allows me to screw any additional equipment to the plywood and not have to worry about it falling off later on. For right now, I just have 2 T5s, but early measurements taken with the Sinai seem to indicate that I am going to need another pair to be added a little bit later on. But I am going to wait until I have rock in the tank and sand on the bottom before I make that decision. I should have gone bigger with the plywood in the back. I'm already out of room and I still have a couple of pieces of electronics to add. I will be able to make room for it, but it might mean that not everything is in one place. I also had to move everything over for my frag tank prematurely. But that won't be a major problem, and it gives me a chance to break in the skimmer and hopefully be rid of these micro bubbles a little sooner. Initial testing did show that I needed to make a couple of design changes to the sump, but that'll be for another video. And the next time, we're going to get some rock and sand into this tank, and we'll cover the aquascape and get this tank stocked. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure and check out parts 1 through 4 to see how we got here, and give me a like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the future videos. So until next time, this is Jason with Born Handy.